A lesson in reading, Chapter 18. Of course, Justin did not escape that day, nor even that year. When they, Julie, put on a glove and went to pick him up, he submitted meekly enough, and in a short time he was back in his cage. Yet he had learned some things. He had, as Julie noticed, examined the air ducts, the openings along the wall, through which warm air flowed in winter and cool air in summer. And he had studied the windows. Mainly, he had learned that he could occasionally, at least, jump from his cage and wander around without incurring any anger or injury. All of this eventually was important, for it was Justin, along with Jenner, who finally figured out how to get away. I had a part in it too, but that all came later. I won't go into details about the rest of our training, except for one part of it that was the most useful of all. But in general, during the months that followed, two things were happening. First, we were learning more than any rats had ever before and were becoming more intelligent than any rats had ever been. The second thing could be considered from some points of view even more important, and certainly more astonishing than the first. Dr. Schultz, you will recall, had said the new series of injections might increase your lifespan by double or more. Yet, even he was not prepared for what had happened. Perhaps it was the odd combination of both types of injections working together. I don't know, and neither did he. But the result was that as far back as he could detect in the A group was the aging process seemed to stop almost completely. For example, during the years that we were in the laboratory, most of the rats in the control group grew old and sickly and finally died. So did those in the B group. For though they were getting injections too, the formula was not the same as ours. But among the 20 of us in A group, no one could see any signs that we were growing older at all. Apparently, though we seldom saw them, the same thing was happening with the G group, the mice who were getting the same injections we were. Dr. Schultz was greatly excited about this. The short lifespan has always been a prime limiting factor in education, he told George and Julie. If we can double it and speed up the learning process at the same time, the possibilities are enormous. Double it? Even now, years later, years after the injections were stopped, we seem scarcely any older than we were then. We could not detect either of these things ourselves. That is, we didn't feel any different, and since we had no contact with the other groups, we had no basis for comparison. All we had to go by was what Dr. Schultz said. He and the others were preparing a research paper about us, to be published in some scientific journal. So each morning he dictated the results of the previous day's test into a tape recorder. He heard all of it, though there were a lot of technical stuff we couldn't understand, especially at first. Until the paper was published, he kept reminding George and Julie of this. The whole experiment was to be kept a secret. The one important phase of training began one day after weeks of really hard work at the shape recognition that I mentioned before. But this was different. For the first time, they used sounds, along with shapes and pictures, real pictures we could recognize. For example, one of the first and simplest of these exercises was a clear photograph of a rat. I suppose they felt sure we would know what that was. The picture was shown on the screen with a light behind it. Then, after I had looked at the picture and recognized it, a shape flashed across the screen. A sort of half circle with two straight lines, not like anything I'd seen before. Then the voice began. R. 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 It was Julie's voice speaking very clearly, but it had a tinny sound. It was on a record. After repeating R a dozen times or so, the particular shape disappeared and another one came up on the screen, still under the picture of the rat. It was a triangle with legs on it, and Julie's voice began. A. 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 When that shape disappeared, a third one came onto the screen. This one was a cross. Julie's voice said, T. 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 Then all three shapes appeared at once, and the record said R. A. T. Rat. You will have already recognized what was going on. They were teaching us to read. The symbols under the picture were the letters R-A-T. The idea did not become clear to me, nor to any of us, for quite a long time. Because, of course, we didn't know what reading was. Oh, we learn shapes to recognize shapes easily